tonight on the Final Play.
I think it's still a work in progress. I didn't think that was very good. We'll watch the film and make the corrections.
We'll examine the final steps for the black and gold to be contenders. Plus, college football has a hot stove, and it's been full of player movement. Hear about new arrivals at LSU, Tulane, and Nichols, as well as the new outlook for Southeastern. And high school football is heating up. We'll preview the 2018 season as football takes over the Final Play.
From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Final Play, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealer, built Ford tough, and Nissan.
Welcome into the Final Play. I'm Juan Kincaid. After Saturday night's performance in Los Angeles, Saints fans definitely have a Super Bowl or bust mentality. Thankfully, the Saints themselves do not, although they certainly know their potential. And their dominating win over the Chargers was a reminder of just how good they can be when it all comes together. Getting us started tonight, Sean Vazan.
With a 36-7 win over the Chargers, the Saints departed their West Coast road trip feeling good in some ways and concerned in others. The starters played their most amount of snaps of the preseason, and frankly, they looked sluggish on both sides of the ball to open the game. Offensively, Drew Brees was picked off on the first drive.
I just forced it. Got a little over-aggressive to start the game.
On defense, they really struggled to stop the run.
I think it's still a work in progress. I was disappointed early in the game, particularly with our linebacker play. I didn't think that was very good. We'll watch the film and make the corrections.
But it certainly wasn't all bad. First-round pick Marcus Davenport made his preseason debut and showed the athleticism and playmaking ability that led the Saints to move up in the draft to get him. He finished with a half sack and a tackle for loss.
I was nervous pregame, but actually getting out there helped me calm down, and I was really just happy to be able to play with my teammates, like actually play.
Taysom Hill popped up yet again, first on special teams when his fake punt sparked the offense's first points.
This is the time of the year to do that, and look, we feel like, he's one of those players that, he does a lot of things well.
As a quarterback, Hill bounced back from his disastrous night a week ago with an impressive touchdown run where he patiently went through his reads and took off for the end zone. He also added a touchdown pass later to Traquan Smith.
I think everyone that's played the position can look back in their career and they can see highlights and they can see games where like, man, I'd love to have that game back and I can do better there. And I'll certainly look at this tape and I'll say the same thing. Like, I can do things better, but look at some things to say that I did well.
But can you imagine the load that's on you as a quarterback, and then couple that with being a four-core special teams guy. There's a lot on that guy's plate, and he has handled it as well as anybody can handle it.
And Smith wasn't the only receiver to step up. Austin Carr took advantage of his opportunities with the first team and finished with 3 catches. His recent emergence only heightens the competition in a very tight wide receiver battle.
Competition is high. We got a lot of talented guys out there. Obviously, you saw several rotations of wide receivers, and that just makes us better.
That depth chart is like it written in chalk, or it's not permanent ink.
Joined now by Jeff Duncan, TimesPicayuneAll.com sports columnist, Saints columnist. And Jeff, why don't we start with the starters, the first team. What did you like, what did you not like about that first team tonight?
Well, offensively, I like the way they ran the ball. That's been a strength of the entire camp, I think, so far. We know this offense behind that really good offensive line is going to be able to move the ball on the ground with those 2 good running backs. Defensively, though, I thought it was a little shaky early on. Phillip Rivers and company kind of moved the ball at will. I know they got to stop there on that opening drive. Normally, I think the Chargers would have kicked a field goal there. So they couldn't get off the field again, and that's a concern for me. Most of the domination tonight by the Saints was by their backup defense, turning Geno Smith and Cardale Jones kind of really confusing those guys. They didn't get much done against Phillip Rivers.
I was a little disappointed in the linebacker play. I felt like, first off, the defensive line really had trouble kind of keeping their landmarks, and then the second level had trouble disengaging from blocks, and they really struggled in run defense, I thought.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the run defense was non-existent early on, and the Chargers didn't even have Melvin Gordon out there, their number 1 running back. Their first 3 runs averaged over 10 yards a carry. They got to get better, and that's something Dennis Allen will be reviewing on film, I guarantee you, maybe on the way home.
Let's talk about the talk of the preseason. You've wrote about them a lot. Taysom Hill kind of sparked this team with the fake punt. He had a special teams tackle. I think we saw Taysom Hill, the football player tonight, the total package. He's such a unique talent. I mean, it's a fun debate to have. Is he the number 2 quarterback? But is he the number 2? He can't really play special teams, but he might be the best special teams player. What do you think of Taysom Hill and where he's at in his development?
Well, I think he's going to be the backup quarterback on this football team, and then they're going to have a problem on their hands of how they manage his special teams work and his backup quarterback work, because it's a lot on his plate. Drew Brees talked about it tonight, said that he's got a lot on his mind right now, and he's doing a lot for this football team. But if he gets to be the backup, which I think he will, I think they're going to have a heck of a weapon in Taysom Hill, because he's a weapon on fake punts, as we saw tonight. He's a weapon if he decides to hold for extra points, and he's a weapon on that 2-point conversion run, running that read option. And he's a lot of fun. Let's face it, they haven't really had a guy like this on this team in the Drew Brees era, so I like watching him play.
Like I said, he's just such an outlier of a player. I could even see a scenario where Peyton mixes him into the offense temporarily, kind of sprinkles him in here and there as almost a surprise, even as the number 2 quarterback and a special teams player.
Yeah, sort of like we saw some teams use it to go with a Wildcat package. They may have some packages just for Taysom Hill. And look, he's a wild card. That's a perfect word for him. And I think he's getting better and better as he gets more comfortable in this offense.
Preseason debut for Marcus Davenport. He got thrown in with the early injury to Trey Hendrickson. Then he was back in the game a few series later. I thought the kid played well. I felt like you saw that burst off the line of scrimmage. You saw a guy that didn't look overwhelmed. He said he was nervous before the game, but still, I thought overall it was a pretty good preseason debut.
Well, you could see why the Saints were so high on him. That athletic ability is very rare for a 6'5" defensive end to be able to make a play in the open field against Travis Benjamin on that jet sweep. You just don't see guys do plays like that. And I agree with you. He's burst off the edge. He didn't get really, I think he had a half sack tonight, but he was in the quarterback's face a lot, moving him off his mark. And that's exactly what they want from him right now. He may not get a ton of sacks, but just being able to pressure the quarterback is going to be a huge boost for this defense.
It's funny you said it, because that scenario kind of showed itself up tonight, because he got around the left tackle on one play, kind of dipped his shoulder and got the pressure. Didn't register a statistic on that play, but still affected the play. Has anyone over the last couple of weeks helped themselves, maybe talk their way onto this roster, or at least into the conversation with their play over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I thought tonight Austin Carr, backup receiver, played very well. That's a very intense competition. I think that's going down to the final preseason game. Tommy Lee Lewis played well tonight, and I think those guys are battling for a roster spot behind the big 4 receiver. And I think on the other side, I think Jermon Bushrod, the backup offensive lineman, has not played well enough right now to secure a spot on this roster. He may still make it, but I think it's still a question mark.
And now as we kind of close the book on this West Coast trip, they've had 3 preseason games. We've seen a ton of practices. That last preseason game is really for the guys, last 2 roster spots. Do you like where this team is right now?
Yeah, I do. I think this team is shown they're much better right now, Sean, along both lines. I mean, that's the strength of this team, other than quarterback Drew Brees and that offense. They've got a really solid offensive line. Their defensive line has better depth than they've had in a long time, and that's where football games are won. And I think that gives this team a chance to go deep in the playoffs and maybe win games on the road in January when they haven't been able to do that in the past because of the strengths up front.
Certainly helps, and hopefully it can translate into the regular season, which will be here before we know it. Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And don't forget, tomorrow evening, Sean and I will be alongside Deuce McAllister for the Black and Gold Review Show. The Saints Hall of Famer will lend his perspective to what happened Saturday night and what's to come as we get closer to final cuts. Also, now's the time to voice your opinion. Get us some questions. You can do that by pulling up your FinalPlay app, clicking on the Final Word feature, the Black and Gold Review Show, 10:35 tomorrow night, right here on Fox 8. Coming up on the FinalPlay, a week before the season kicks off, and the LSU Tigers finally got some welcome news on cornerback Christian Fulton. And uptown, the Tulane Green Wave are celebrating the arrival of a former Tiger. We'll head to campus next.
You're watching the Final Play.
Our Fox 8 Catch of the Week takes us back to Saturday night's game in L.A. and another Tommy Lee Lewis highlight that'll increase his chances of making the final roster. Tom Savage leads them, but Lewis still has to make the catch. And he does. Great hands by TLL, and it's our Fox 8 Catch of the Week. Now to college football, and LSU may not know who its starting quarterback is. for the season opener a week from tonight, but they do know who will be starting at one of their cornerback spots. And it's a player they didn't think they'd get back this season. Christian Fulton, the former Rummel Raider, was reinstated by the NCAA on Thursday, eligible to play right away. His 2-year suspension for tampering with a drug test was reduced to 1 year after it was determined that he should have been charged with urine substitution, which carries a 1-year suspension from the NCAA. Fulton's been practicing with the team, mostly with the first and second team, but expect this difference maker to be in the starting lineup when the Tigers take the field against Miami next Sunday night.
I want to thank Christian Fulton and his family for all the work that they've done and believe in Christian. Practice every day here like he was a starter. He never blinked. I'm so proud of the young man. I know our team is going to be elated. Good young man. He is a good young man. He made a mistake. And I'm happy that it turned out that way. I think he paid the price.
As for Tulane, they made news late last week in part because of LSU. Former Tiger quarterback Justin McMillan has signed on to play Uptown, where he will walk in as a backup to Jonathan Banks. And like Banks, McMillan is a dual threat quarterback, meaning he's the ideal signal caller for head coach Willie Fritz's offense, though it won't be right away with Banks being the clear starter for this season. So you can forget about Tulane having any type of quarterback controversy.
I feel like this is a family vibe here, and I feel really comfortable here so far. You know, the guys have taken me in. JB's helped me out a lot in the quarterback room, and it feels smooth. You know, I'm getting everything a hang of. You know, I'm getting the hang of everything, and I feel good so far.
Also set to kick off the season Thursday night, the Southeastern Lions, who will be on the road at UL Monroe. And with the arrival of new head coach Frank Selfo comes a change in offensive philosophy. Chris Hagan has more from Hammond.
Just days away from the season opener against Louisiana Monroe, the Lions are putting the finishing touches on a new and what they hope is improved offense. Over the last few years, Southeastern's featured a plethora of running backs, 4 of them with multiple rushing touchdowns in 2017. But this year, with more of an emphasis on the passing game, some roles could change.
We implemented a lot of 2-back, 3-back sets that get us into the slot a lot, get us into the passing game a lot more too as well. So that definitely, I would say, has opened up a lot of more opportunities for the running backs to, get out and with the passing game as well as the run game.
But of course, everything starts with the quarterback. The question is, which one? Last year's starter, Lorenzo Nunez, an outstanding dual-threat athlete, or the newcomer, Chasen Virgil, a transfer from Fresno State that brings the experience of playing quarterback on the FBS level.
He understands the game, and he understands what he needs to do. I think he's got good control of the offense. So he's got some things, and he's put himself in a position. Doesn't turn the football over, does a good job of taking care of it, and I think that's probably the number one thing to do from a quarterback standpoint.
Coach Selfo says the decision could come all the way down to game time on Thursday, but the vision for whichever quarterback he picks is clear.
They got to provide leadership for our football team because coaches aren't on the field. It's all about the players once the game starts. And he does a good job of that, as does Lorenzo. So when you look at those guys, them being able to do those things on the field for us and, the arm strength and the talent, all those things, it's the preparation that goes into it. Those guys are willing to spend off the field that separates them.
Reporting on the Lions, I'm Chris Hagan for the Final Play.
And don't worry, Nichols fans, we didn't forget about you. Up next on the Final Play, we'll have head coach Tim Rebowe in studio to preview the season. And later, high school football kicks off this week, and Garland Gillen will run down the teams to beat this season.
Watching the Final Play.
Once upon a time, not too long ago, Nichols football was an afterthought. They were 0-12 just 4 years ago. But in 2017, the Colonels became front page news, all because they started winning again, putting together their best season in more than 2 decades and getting themselves back in the national playoffs for the first time since 2005. A lot of players from that team are back for another go at it. Question is, can they live up to the hype that comes with being picked as one of the favorites to win the Southland Conference title? Last year, we invited Nichols head coach Tim Rebowe down during the preseason, and they made the FCS tournament. We're a little superstitious. Nice to have you back once again.
Thanks for having me. When you invited, you knew I was coming.
We appreciate it. So, listen, so much success last year. You have to kind of get this team used to having that target on their back. How do you coach that with a school that's haven't been in this position in a long time?
Well, I think the message has always been the same. We can't forget what got us to this point, and every team is different. We start from the bottom and try to build that foundation, even though we have a lot of guys returning. But those guys got to know that we got to work hard, we got to stay humble, we got to be great teammates to each other, and those are the things that's got us to where we are.
You've gone from 3-8 to 5-6 to 8-4, and you say your message hasn't changed since day one you stepped on campus. Players eventually begin to buy in when they see the success that you're having.
Yes, and then the players recruit players, and I think that's what's happened along the way too. When we started the camp in August and we looked across the board and says it was a little bit different, a lot of veterans, a lot of leadership, those guys knew what it takes to be successful, and they kind of start coaching themselves and coaching each other. It makes our job a little bit easier.
Every college coach will tell you have to have a quarterback to kind of lead the whole thing. Chase has been really good. Chase Forcade, Rummel alum there, been very good. 2,300 yards passing last year, 14 touchdowns, but I know you see the ceiling's not even close to being met yet. What's the next step in his progression?
Well, I think he can take this team even further, and me and him talk all the time, and Rob Christophel, our offensive coordinator, is, yeah, we won 8 games with him, and he didn't have an outstanding year. We turned the ball over a little bit. I think that's going to be the big thing for him. He wants to limit those turnovers and see if we can make a little noise down the road.
There was a quote in the Port Arthur News from you. It said, our guys always want to prove they can play with the big boys. I like the attitude they can win big games. If you can have depth on both the offense and defensive lines, when you look at those two areas, do you think you have that this year?
You know, I think when you look back to when we went to Georgia 2 years ago and we went to A&M, we had that, and we in the trenches, you can control some of that, and we did it. And I think we do. We got a couple guys coming back on the offensive line, some all-conference players, and then we have 5, 6, 7, 8 deep we can go. Wow. Defensive line, the same thing. We got Sully Lesh coming back, Kenny Dotson at defensive end, and Ronald. Yeah, and Ronald Ollie's coming back for his senior year. So I think we do have the quality depth that we can go and battle some of those guys.
There were a couple in-state, I guess, transfers back into the state, back to your school that made a lot of news down here, especially Kendall Bussey coming from Texas A&M. He played at Newman High School. Alex Anderson played at Landry Walker. He comes back from Texas. Kind of give me an idea. Are these two guys plug and play right away, or will they kind of ease them into the system?
No, I think those are guys that can come in and play right away. Pop is a graduate transfer. Alex coming from Texas, and he adds some depth. You know, he could be our 6th guy coming in. And then, of course, Kendall Bussey, tremendous athlete. We saw him play last year when we went to A&M. He rushed for 90-plus yards against us, and we knew about him. But he comes in and fits into a backfield that's pretty deep in running backs, and but he's really pretty special back there.
What does it tell you about when players of this quality are coming back to the state? We always say Louisiana kids don't want to leave Louisiana, but what does it tell you about these kids coming back and want to come to Nichols?
Well, they're seeing the success that we have, and they thinking, hey, they want to come in and play, and they can help this program. And we talked to Kendall about that. We want to lead us to get even further, win a conference championship, something that we hadn't done, and he was ready to do that.
You know, KUSports.com, which is one of their websites for University of Kansas, the team you guys opened against this year, said the Colonels game could go either way. That's the kind of expectation that you've been trying to build at this university since you've been there, and it seems like the message is getting out.
Yeah, you know, our guys are reading all the papers just like they are, and you know, people say, oh, you can win that game, you can win that game. You know, we like to think we can go into any atmosphere and win those games. It's going to be tough, and then you look at that one in week 2, we come down and play Tulane in New Orleans, which will be good for our fans. We've never played Tulane, so I think our guys are excited about it, and they're looking forward to the challenge.
Georgia, Texas A&M, not over the hump there, but very close. Do you think this Kansas game is one you guys can go in there and steal?
Well, I think if we go in and do our job, and we have some talent across the board, we have some weapons out wide, you know, Damian Jean-Pierre, Dejon Dixon, I think we can move the ball on it, but, you know, you still got to get some breaks along the way.
No doubt about that. All right, Colonels will open the season September 1st on the Jayhawks home field. Tim Rebowe, the head coach of Nichols, we appreciate you coming down again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's finally game week for Nichols and the rest of our college football teams. It all begins with Tulane and Southeastern kicking their seasons off Thursday night. The Greenies will host Wake Forest, while the Lions will be on the road at the Warhawks. On September 1st, the Colonels, Southern, and Grambling State all get their seasons underway. All 3 will be on the road. And on the 2nd, you've got the LSU Tigers taking their show on the road to Arlington, Texas to face 8th-ranked Miami. Coming up, let the high school madness that is prep football begin.
watching The Final Play.
Finally tonight, it's about to begin. The march to the Superdome for high school teams. And of course, some teams' chances are just better than others. But you still have to play the game. Garland Gillen previews what's to come on the Prep Gridiron.
The New Orleans area won 2 state titles in 2017. The Carr Cougars grabbed their 2nd state crown in a row, and West St. John beat Kentwood in a closely contested matchup. In 2018, schools in the Fox 8 viewing area are primed to do more damage in the Dome this time around. John Curtis and Rummel both returned starters at the most important position on the field, quarterback. The Patriots' Colin Guggenheim and Rummel's Chandler Fields have the talent around them to make a run in December in Division I. In Class 5A, it appeared Hahnville had the blueprint for another state title appearance, but the LHSAA's ruling of quarterback Andrew Robinson being ineligible changed all that. The Tigers are appealing the ruling. Speaking of Tigers, Terrebonne has their best squad in over 20 years, led by super talented Ja'Kai Douglas. Expect to hear more from Terrebonne in the wintertime. In Class 4A, it's 2 squads from our area that had the best shot to win a state title. Carr looking for a three-peat, and Warren Easton led by quarterback Lance Lejeune. The Eagles last won a state title way back in 1942. In Division III, the Newman Greenies look to repeat an undefeated regular season. The Greenies returned senior quarterback Martin Butcher. Newman last year matched their best finish in school history, a run to the semifinals.
All right, let's get it.
In Class 2A, Amite possesses 2 of the best players in the country, defensive lineman Ishmael Sopsher and wide receiver Devontae Lee. It's been 14 years since the Warriors won a state title, and many off I-55 think this could be the year for another Dome run. Covering prep football, Garland Gillen, Fox 8 Sports.
Thanks a lot, Garland. With the return of the prep season also comes the return of Fox 8 Football Friday. It's season 5 for us, and we're anxious to kick off the prep season with you. Garland, Chris Hagan, and Sean Vazan will have your highlights. They'll also have your coaches' reactions, and they'll keep you up on all things recruiting every week. It's all on Fox 8 Football Friday, beginning this Friday at 10:35 here on Fox 8. And that's our show for tonight. For all of us here at Fox 8, I'm Juan Kincaid. We hope you'll join us again next Sunday night for the Final Play.
From Fox 8 Sports, this has been The Final Play.